Welcome to your weekday Cup of the Word. We're in Hebrews chapter 5, and we're going to look at how Jesus is our high priest. Now, this theme will continue for multiple chapters through Hebrews, but here we're very clearly introduced to the idea of what a high priest is. Aaron was chosen by God to be high priest, and his sons after him. And first of all, he'll point out here, the Hebrew writer will, that God chooses who the high priest is. He chose Aaron. He chose Aaron's sons, and he chose Jesus. Jesus didn't say, hey, I want to be high priest, pick me, or I choose it. God chose him. God says, this is my son. He is your high priest. So first of all, Jesus has been glorified by God. And then the other thing is a high priest has really one job. The high priest's job was to mediate between God and man, to make those sacrifices for the people so that God would forgive him. And Jesus does that. Now, one of the unique characteristics about a high priest is that he is mediating between God and man, and he understands man. He understands man's weaknesses, his faults, his sins, his shortcomings, because the high priest is a man himself. Now, Jesus, and he'll talk more about this as we move further into the book, but Jesus is able to do that too because he is fully man. But he isn't weak. He isn't full of sin. He hasn't faulted himself. He is the perfect high priest, able to understand our need for forgiveness, able to understand why we fail and our weaknesses, but also to be perfect to stand before God and ask on our behalf that we be saved. Now, in this chapter, he'll also talk about Jesus being of the order of Melchizedek, but he'll even tell the readers, he'll say, now, look, I'm going to talk to you more about this, and he will in chapter 7. So for now, we'll do exactly what the Hebrew writer did, and we'll just put it off for now, but understand Melchizedek is going to come up again, and that Jesus is not just high priest, but he's a Melchizedek high priest, which is a special type of high priest. And then he'll finish this chapter with a very pointed statement that, look, the reason I can't talk to you about Melchizedek yet is you're not ready because you're dull listeners, you haven't been growing, you haven't been pressing forward, you've been drifting, you've been not the kind of people growing closer to Christ the way you ought to. And there is a very clear statement made by the writer that to be a Christian, we need to be people who press forward, who grow, who learn, who mature in Christ so that someday we may teach others also. That's your Daily Cup, and we'll see you tomorrow.